Have you ever stumbled upon a game that promises the world, only to leave you wondering if it bit off more than it could chew? That's the exact question surrounding Eternal Strands, an indie action-adventure that boldly claims to fuse the magic of Shadow of the Colossus with the boundless freedom of Breath of the Wild. On paper, it sounds like a gamer's dream come true, yet behind the scenes, early controversies and questionable design choices have stirred up a storm of debate. Is this a hidden masterpiece that just needs time to shine? Or an ambitious misfire doomed from the start? Let's dive into every corner of this mysterious title. Eternal Strands began turning heads the moment Yellow Brick Games announced it. As a brand new indie studio, they hyped up a creation meant to rival gaming's greatest open worlds. Fans immediately latched onto the promise of grand Colossi battles, advanced magic systems, and endless freedom of movement. But from the outset, murmurs suggested things weren't quite so grand behind closed doors. Insiders claimed that halfway through production, internal disputes broke out over how much Eternal Strands should mimic Breath of the Wild. Some team members supposedly wanted a larger open world, while others focused on the narrative depth reminiscent of classic BioWare titles. The result? According to rumors, resources were stretched thin, forcing the developers to cut corners. These alleged disagreements set the stage for a final product that might not fully match its initial vision. This swirl of controversy only fueled more excitement when the first teaser trailers dropped. Footage of Brynn, the main character, climbing massive beasts and casting elemental magic looked polished enough, but cryptic developer interviews hinted at bigger design issues they weren't ready to discuss. Even so, fans held tight to the idea that Eternal Strands could become the next big phenomenon if everything went according to plan. But that was just the beginning of the story. On the surface, the setting is everything an explorer dreams of. A lost civilization once rich in magic, now in ruins, just waiting to be rediscovered. Eternal Strands drops you into the Enclave, an isolated realm brimming with ancient towers, weathered temples, and a haunting aura of forbidden sorcery. The environments come in distinct zones, each with its own climate challenges: blistering deserts, misty wetlands, frigid highlands. While each area feels atmospherically unique, the game doesn't deliver on a truly seamless open world. Instead, Eternal Strands funnels you through segmented maps, connected to a central hub, the South Wall Way Station. Players looking for that wide-open sense of wonder might find themselves let down. Each area is large enough to roam around for a while, but those repeated loading screens and zone transitions break the immersion. Some speculate that the developers wanted a grander scale but had to compromise due to budget constraints, one of the earliest rumors that has never been officially confirmed. Another sticking point is the inventory system. With only a handful of slots for each material type, resource hoarders may feel stifled. Constantly returning to the hub can interrupt the flow, yanking you out of the sense of adventure. While creative scarcity can build tension in survival games, it feels misplaced here, especially for players hoping to replicate the organic exploration found in bigger titles. But the deeper you go, the more you start to sense that there's more to Eternal Strands than just a fractured open world. At the heart of Eternal Strands is Brynn, a young, talented weaver in a band of magic users daring to cross into forbidden territory. Legend says an advanced people once thrived here, wielding powerful magic until a catastrophic downfall. Now, with the magical arts nearly outlawed, Brynn and her companions explore these ruins, trying to understand how their own future might hinge on the secrets of this lost land. If this sounds like a recipe for an epic saga, you're not alone in that thought. Initially, you might feel excited, piecing together cryptic lore as you collect scattered manuscripts and decode ancient inscriptions. However, the further you progress, the more the story reveals its biggest flaw: the absence of a driving spark. The stakes feel strangely impersonal, even when the script attempts to convey danger. Many fans say it's missing that sense of urgency. There's no looming threat that ties directly to Brynn's personal journey. Another talking point among players is the game's heavy use of fantasy jargon. Within the first few hours, you're bombarded with unique terms, from Weaver's Veil to Enclave's Lattice. While it aims for rich world-building, the avalanche of unfamiliar phrases can be disorienting. Some believe that the writing team got caught up in building a massive lore Bible, forgetting to ground players gradually. Despite these storytelling hiccups, the game does deliver an ensemble of side characters, each with their own backstory. But their personalities lean on predictable archetypes: the stern mentor, the quirky scholar, the brooding rogue. Dialogue choices and conversation menus are plentiful, yet rarely change outcomes, leaving some to question if these branching options are merely cosmetic. So, does the gameplay fare any better in keeping you engaged? Let's see what battles await. One thing Eternal Strands nails right out of the gate is the feel of movement. Brynn runs, jumps, and climbs with a fluidity reminiscent of top-tier action games. You can cling to almost any surface, scaling cliffs and ancient statues with ease. For players who love to roam vertically, it's an intoxicating sense of freedom. That same responsiveness extends to combat. Dodges, parries, and swift attacks feel crisp, even if the enemy variety doesn't always match the fluid controls. Magic is another big draw. Each Weaver ability, from shooting ice shards to conjuring flames, can be upgraded using materials you collect on expeditions. Freezing an enemy, then smashing them with a fire-imbued sword can be supremely satisfying. But the system for switching between spells and weapons can be clunky. Instead of a quick toggle, you scroll through an awkward wheel that sometimes misreads your selection. In heated battles, this can lead to frantic scrambling, turning exhilarating moments into frustration. Enemies themselves range from small packs of invisible beasts to heavily armored behemoths. The invisible types can feel cheap, as they nullify lock-on targeting and swarm you in unpredictable ways. For some players, these encounters are more aggravating than challenging, especially when you're just trying to gather materials and keep pushing forward. It's not all gloom, though. Pulling off successful counters with a large sword or using carefully timed parries with a staff can be thrilling. At its best, the combat system lets you feel like a formidable mage warrior. However, the real tests of your skill come in the form of towering boss battles. Ever since the first trailers, fans have pinned high hopes on Eternal Strand's sprawling boss encounters. The game doesn't disappoint in scale. Once you confront these colossal creatures, you must climb, cling to their fur or scales, and carefully strike weak points as they thrash around. It's a nod to Shadow of the Colossus that can feel delightfully intense, especially when you time your leaps to avoid being thrown off from dizzying heights. Each boss reveals new, destructive attacks the higher you climb. Some shoot blasts of magic energy, while others try to shake you loose amid raging storms. There's a consistent rush in these fights, partly because missing a jump can send you plummeting to the ground, forcing you to start the climb anew. Clinging for dear life while scanning for the next vulnerable spot never gets old. Yet, it's important to note that these epic fights don't evolve much. After you take down a few of these hulking monsters, you'll notice a pattern. Climb, locate weak point, slash, hold on tight. The variety in their appearance and environments is impressive, but the mechanics rarely offer a fresh twist. Some players have called this repetition disappointing, hoping for more elaborate puzzle-based approaches to each Colossus. Regardless, many fans still see these encounters as the highlight of Eternal Strands. They inject a spark of grandeur and risk into a game that sometimes struggles to keep your adrenaline pumping elsewhere. But how did these showdowns end up being the game's strongest suit? And why does the rest of the experience feel uneven? The answer may lie in the game's complicated development cycle. Before release, whispers suggested that the team's ex-BioWare leads wanted a deep, character-driven story, while the more action-focused developers pushed for streamlined gameplay. Some ex-employees claimed that constant pivoting exhausted the staff, forcing them to finalize certain game systems halfway through production. That's why certain aspects, like the climbing mechanics or boss battles, seem polished, whereas inventory management or zone exploration feel tacked on. Others pointed to a shortage of resources or time, hinting at a rushed-to-market scenario. It's rumored that crucial game systems, such as a better quest log or a simpler method to track items, were on the roadmap, but got cut due to financial pressures. Fans are still piecing together interviews and job postings that suggest a wave of layoffs hit the team in the final months of development. None of these details have been fully verified, but the chatter persists. To the studio's credit, they've been responsive about some of the community's concerns. Patches aimed at balancing difficulty spikes and expanding inventory space are supposedly in the works. Data miners even discovered hints of an entirely new region that might arrive as DLC or a free update. Whether or not that's enough to salvage the game's more disappointing elements remains to be seen. Yet, for many players, these rumored expansions and fixes are too little, too late. What started as an inspiring indie giant in the making might have stumbled under its own ambition. Still, a loyal group of supporters believes in the game's potential, hoping each update will bring it closer to the masterpiece they initially envisioned. This mixed sentiment is reflected clearly in the player reviews. When Eternal Strands launched, reviews came in all over the spectrum. Some praised the exhilarating boss fights, praising the sense of scale and tension as a breath of fresh air in the action-adventure genre. They highlighted the slick climbing mechanics and the excitement of combining magic with physical weaponry. For these fans, the game's shortcomings felt like minor distractions. Others couldn't overlook the flaws. They pointed out the tedious inventory limitations, the awkward zone layout, and the underwhelming storyline. Several critiques zeroed in on the shallow conversation choices that promised depth, but never truly impacted the narrative. According to this group, the game's identity crisis, Trying to be part open-world survival, part narrative-driven adventure, and part climbing-focused action kept it from excelling in any one category. A few voices suggested that if you can tune out the hype and accept Eternal Strands for what it is, an experimental indie with rough edges, there's still fun to be had. You might enjoy the methodical pace, scouring each region for hidden manuscripts and collecting enough gear for epic boss hunts. After all, the thrill of scaling a giant creature to land the final blow can be downright electrifying. So the real question remains, is Eternal Strands a rough gem awaiting polish, or just another cautionary tale of overpromise and underdeliver? The next updates from Yellow Brick Games may hold the answer. When you consider everything, fluid climbing, cinematic boss fights, an intriguing magical premise, Eternal Strands has the core ingredients to be something remarkable. Unfortunately, that promise feels diluted by stunted exploration, scattered storytelling, and design decisions that frequently break immersion. Whether it's the inventory micromanagement or the barrage of lore jargon, these issues keep Eternal Strands from standing toe-to-toe with the classics it draws inspiration from. Still, the developers have shown a willingness to address community feedback. Patches and potential expansions might yet breathe new life into this game. Perhaps given time and care, Eternal Strands could evolve closer to its original vision and deliver on all that early hype. The big mystery is whether the majority of players will stick around for that evolution or move on to the next big release. Only you can decide if it's worth the journey. Does the rush of climbing a colossal creature outweigh the frustration of constantly juggling inventory? Do the glimpses of deep lore and hidden secrets leave you craving more? Or do they simply highlight the lack of a compelling main story? Share your thoughts below and let us know where you stand. Will Eternal Strands enchant you with its lofty ambitions or leave you wanting a more complete adventure elsewhere? If you enjoyed this breakdown, or if you're still on the fence, don't forget to subscribe and enable all notifications so you won't miss our next deep dive. We've got fresh content every day, tackling everything from hidden indie projects to blockbuster releases. Your support helps us continue digging beneath the surface of every game we can get our hands on. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.